Hello, and you're very welcome to the first ever virtual Camogie Talk, where we're going to be previewing the Liberty Insurance All-Ireland Senior Championship Final between Kilkenny and Galway. I'm delighted to be joined by Ursula Jacob and Daragh Ó Conchúir today. We're going to be previewing everything about the All-Ireland Final and, of course, looking back at the championship so far. You're very welcome, guys. Welcome to Zoom.
Anna?
Great to be here.
Yet another Zoom, but isn't it wonderful that we are in the opportunity now where we actually have a chance to preview an All-Ireland Final. A few months ago, people didn't know if this was going to happen, and what a championship that we've had so far. What's been your highlight so far of the 2020 championship?
For me, I suppose, Anna, I think one of the highlights was seeing how Westmeath adapted to senior level and they got their first win against Limerick. And I think that, showed all the hard work that Johnny Greville has put into this team over the last number of years. Look, in the last 5 years alone, they won junior, progressed to intermediate, and then had a fantastic win last year in the intermediate final to then move into senior. And I suppose we were all curious to see how they would do. And I think they performed admirably. And obviously Johnny Greville has now departed and left the setup, and he's going to be a huge loss. But for me, I think it was brilliant to see Westmeath playing at senior level, and I think they did really well.
What about you, Daragh?
What stood out for me, I guess, Anna, was Rebecca Henley's two sideline pucks. And number one, that they were game winners and were the difference between Galway playing Tipperary in a semi-final and Galway playing Kilkenny in a semi-final. Number two, that they illustrated that skill is there in Camogie, because this isn't the first time that Rebecca Henley has done that. She's been doing it for years, but because these games were all streamed, which was one of the unintended probably benefits of us being in lockdown, more eyes were in Camogie in the last couple of months than have ever been on Camogie, which is just incredible. But also we got those scores clipped and retweeted and commented and retweeted, and it was fantastic to see. And you were going to see the impact on this now over the next couple of years, because that's almost a goal, a 2-point score. People are now going to have to do that, because against Galway that this is a threat against you the whole time. It's going to lift the game, so that was fantastic for me.
And you're right. I think for streaming, to see the thousands logging on for all these matches, and the vast majority of games, I think all bar one, and that was due to weather, which is beyond our control. They were all streamed. So it just shows, a lot of people had a little bit more time in their hands over the last few months. They were sitting down, they were watching Camogie matches, and they were coming away being really impressed with the standard. I think the new rules helped as well, because they allowed the game to flow. They allowed that physicality and that intensity that we love about the game of Camogie to really grow and flourish. And I think Camogie really benefited from it this year. So the job well done. For me personally, I think one of the highlights had to be Anya Slattery's save on Beck Carton in the quarterfinals, because for a goalkeeper that's a senior goalkeeper, also a minor goalkeeper, what a save to make, point blank range from a prolific goal scorer such as Beth. I just think it's a wonderful confidence boost to younger players to have those moments in championship. And I've no doubt Anya Slattery is going to be a key name to watch out for in the years to come. But there's been so many of them, and we could talk about that alone, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So after 18 matches, 43 goals and 431 points scored in the championship, we find ourselves here. The All-Ireland Final, Kilkenny versus Galway. They've only met in the last 10 years, in 2013 and 2019. So it's not like they're used to meeting in All-Ireland Finals year after year. However, in 2019, they met in the league final. They met in the All-Ireland Final. So they do know each other really well. Ursula, for you, when you hear Kilkenny and Galway, what are you immediately thinking?
A huge physical battle. I think it's going to be a really closely contested game. I think last year's game was a thriller. It had everything. Brilliant scores, exceptional defending, and 3 goals from Galway. And it was great to see Galway get over the line eventually, because I suppose last year and the previous couple of years, Galway were thereabouts, and kind of Kilkenny and Cork were getting a stranglehold on things and maybe dominating the finals. And I think Kilkenny I think Galway had a point to prove maybe going into that final, that they wanted to show that they were, you know, in the top 2, top 1 team in Ireland. And look, to me, they've come back again this year and they're kind of performing like champions. I think we haven't probably seen a full 60 minutes of their brilliance yet, but we've seen glimpses of it. And I think the few additional players that have come into the setup this year, you know, the McGrath sisters have been a huge plus for me. You know, they're coming off the back of a great Club All-Ireland win back in March. And, you know, their dynamic in the forwards now has really added to this Galway attack. And also, as Daragh mentioned, Rebecca Henley is another player. Anna, both you and me have played against her. She's a physical player, but she's also, you know, well able to cover a lot of ground. She's able to carry the ball. And her long distance striking is something that I think can add to this Galway team, because when you've got the likes of an Orla McGrath inside or Ailish O'Reilly, it's someone like Rebecca Henley who can play deep, so deep out the field, that can deliver a ball in. But I have to say just one last thing, that Kilkenny back in the final again, I've huge admiration for them. They've lost the last 3 finals and they're back again under new management team, have lost some big names this year, the likes of Katie Power, Michelle Quilty, and
Dwayne Keane.
You know, there's huge turnover. If you look at the semi-final, they only had 9 players that started the All-Ireland last year. So that's 6 players that maybe for different reasons aren't playing. And I just think, you know, fair play to them. I give them huge credit. They've shown huge character to get back into a final, and probably not many people had tipped them to be back there this year.
And Daragh, what's your take on this All-Ireland final? It is going to be a cracker.
Yeah, it is. And the big thing is, it's just great there is one, I think, you know, and I'm just so looking forward to it. And I just hope the weather is kind. Obviously, you're talking about December in Croke Park at 7 o'clock. So, I mean, we'll take dry, won't we? You know, I mean, it's going to be cold. But, you know, all the girls that have played in all these championships deserve huge credit just for even going through what you had to go through to train and play. And then, but listen, Niamh Mallon said it again on Saturday. It's probably a privilege you get to socialise in that. But I'm just really looking forward to it. I'd echo all that about Kilkenny. I just couldn't see how they could beat Cork, you know, and probably they were listening to that chat from a lot of people, and certainly to respond then from going 1-3 down when the people on the sideline are going, yeah, I told you, you know, and in the end they deserve to win. With so many new players, people like Mary O'Connell scoring 2 huge points in the first half, you know, when you're dragging the game back. And then, you know, Mairead Tehan, you know, Aoife Doyle standing up after probably a few years with injuries and things like that. Kellyanne Doyle coming on. What a story.
It's amazing.
Did her cruciate knee ligament against Cork before lockdown and is coming on against them 6 months later. I mean, she must have lived like a professional in the last 6 months. And then Galway, I actually have this feeling that they haven't clicked yet, like, while still always looking comfortable enough, and that's probably as a result of these new players coming in. But look at the bench they have: Noreen Cohen, Catherine Finnerty, Sarah Spellman, Roisin Black, Lorraine Ryan, Siobhan McGrath, Niamh McGrath. I mean, if the game is tight with 10 or 15 minutes to go, to be able to freshen up with match winners is something else. But listen, Kilkenny don't care about history. They just look at the year, and they're there 1 game away from winning an All-Ireland. It's really intriguing.
It really is. Intriguing is definitely a word that I would use as well. But let's get straight into it. So when we think of so many potential matchups, I think that's the beauty when you talk about matchups before an All-Ireland final, because it's trying to get into the heads of the management teams. What are they going to be thinking? They have lots of options. We saw tactical battles all over the pitch. So let's talk about some matchups. So Ursula, I'll start with you. Any potential matchups that you think we might see?
Well, I think maybe the standout one for both teams, like if I was looking at the Galway team, probably the most influential player on that team is Niamh Kilkenny. So for me, you look back on the last year's final, she got 4 points from play, was an integral part in setting up the goals for Galway in that game. So Brian Dowling and his management team no doubt are going to try to curb her influence around the middle third. So for me, looking at the semi-final, Davina Tobin is the obvious man marker for me. she's very pacey. She's very good at sticking to her players. She didn't give Amy O'Connor really an inch. You know, like Amy by the end of the game must have been sick and tired of Davina stuck to her, but that's what Davina Tobin does. And I seen the article during the week, you know, from her that she doesn't mind where she plays. And I think that's very, you know, important, because Niamh Kilkenny will try to cover a lot of ground on Saturday, which she always will. But Davina will be able to match her in terms of pace and speed. But Davina, you know, maybe we underestimate her hurling skill as well, because she's well able to drive out with a ball if she needs to. But Davina won't mind if she doesn't hit a ball on Saturday, as long as she tries to stop Niamh Kilkenny. So for me, I think that's going to be a really, really key one, because I think Kilkenny will be looking to keep the likes of Grace Walsh, Megan Farrell, Colette Dormer all in their positions in the back line, whereas Davina Tobin has that flexibility to go out, push out midfield, or to stay along the half back line. So for me, I think that's going to be the most interesting one.
Yeah, for me, yeah. I mean, look, that is a big one. It's an interesting point on keeping Megan and that in their positions, because they didn't do that against Cork. And we're in big trouble. Won the game of chicken in the end, but we're in big trouble after 15 minutes. And I don't think you can afford to leave those gaps against Galway's attack, because they won't take points from 25, 30 metres out. They will go for the jugular and go for goals. So you cannot leave those spaces. I guess then if you look at the other side, the two tactical issues that intrigue me will be what Kilkenny will try and do with Sarah Dervin, because I think she's, you know, probably even playing better this year than she's ever played, which is insane, because she's an all-star 6 of the last 7 years, and the 1 year she wasn't, she was injured. She is just a powerhouse. You definitely don't want to puck ball down on top of her. So as I mentioned earlier, Kilkenny rotated a lot, and they will try to just get her out of that zone by accident in her head for 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and do something out of that. She's obviously not going to stand out at wing back. And the other thing, the ongoing influence of Kilkenny for me is still Anne Dalton, you know, coming a bit deeper at times, you know, as usual, not as far back as she was maybe in previous years in that centre-back zone. But still then, when Kilkenny needed a big score, catches the ball out of the air and drills it in the back of the net. So, you know, Katrina Cormacan probably did a job on her in the final last year when Anne went into that game, probably as favourite for her Camogie Player of the Year, and had no influence on that game really. So that might be interesting. But then, because of what you said earlier with Niamh and that, Katrina has a very important role around that middle to hold the fort there, because Aoife Donoghue obviously is given licence to roam as well. So that's why I'm glad I'm a pundit and not a manager that actually has to make these decisions, because it's very easy to say A, B, and then, you know, it's like they say, having a plan is great and you get punched in the face, you know. So, but it is intriguing, and there are so many, you know, potential matchups there that will change the game, and it will be someone else that's not a big name player that might come up with the big play.
Yeah, we've seen that already. I mean, I always think of Shane O'Donnell in 2013 All-Ireland final, broke Cork hearts because he came out of nowhere and got those goals. So somebody going in under the radar, someone like Aoife Doyle, maybe it's having a good year with Kilkenny that people might be paying attention to, that shouldn't be paying attention to. So that is going to be really interesting. I would like to briefly get your opinion on the middle third. Right, midfield pairing for me is going to be really important. Who wins that battle? Because you're going to be bypassing the half back line of whatever respective team gets on top. And you saw Kilkenny, they struggled a little bit with the Cork midfield. 5 points from play came from the Cork midfield. Galway do have a very strong midfield, and they tend to have options around there. How do you see that battle going?
Yeah, well, again, you know, it's in the modern game now, in the way Camogie has advanced, it's not really about the middle four, it's about the middle eight, you know, and that's what allows the likes of Niamh Kilkenny and Aoife Donoghue or Chloe Sigerson or whatever to go forward, because you've got cover. And Kilkenny will be the same, and at times there will be different players in those positions, and they won't have 8 and 9 on their jerseys. So it is really about winning the individual battles and winning that possession, and that's what won Kilkenny that game. Because if, you know, that's why I referred to the game of chicken earlier, because if Cork continued to win the individual battles even across their half back line, they would have beaten Kilkenny easily, because Kilkenny were following Orla Cronin and Amy O'Connor, and that was leaving massive gaps. If that possession kept coming that way, well, then the scores were coming, continuing. But what happened was they started winning the battles further out the field, which stopped that flow of possession, stopped Cork playing those 10 and 20 metre passes and getting in behind. And that's what's going to be the key, rather than if you see Niamh Kilkenny and Aoife Donoghue driving forward constantly on Saturday night, Galway were going to win more than likely. You know, if that continues to happen, the way to stop that is to win possession and stop them getting on the ball. You know, that will involve man marking, but that will involve other people winning their battles.
And for me also, on top of that, it's going to be whichever team I feel that can get the more turnovers in that middle third. Looking back on the semi-final, interestingly enough, both Galway and Kilkenny scored 1-8 apiece from turnovers alone. So it's very evenly balanced between the two sides in terms of hooks, blocks, turnovers, getting the breaks on the puck outs. And I think Galway were probably a little bit sharper on getting in on the breaks on the puck outs. And the likes of Niamh Hannafy, Rebecca Henley, who were able to carry the ball. I think Galway probably carried the ball that little bit more, and they're trying to do the running game that we've seen so much with Cork in the last number of years, and then offload it to someone running off the shoulder like Aoife O'Donoghue. Because if you remember and look back on that goal that Carrie Dolan got, that was won from the puck out. And then Ailish O'Reilly and Orla McGrath had a hand in on it then, and Carrie Dolan then was powering through the centre. And if you remember from the final last year against Kilkenny, when Galway got the 3 goals, they seemed to open up Kilkenny with that running game. So I think it's going to be something similar on Sunday or Saturday evening, that Galway are going to try to expose Kilkenny at the back.
We're so used to saying Sunday, isn't it? It's now like Saturday evening, 7 o'clock under lights. I mean, it's been a year like no other, and it's going to be a final like no other. Before I ask you for your predictions, I would like to ask your opinion on what you think the one thing that each team needs to work on to make sure that they have the best possible chance of taking home the O'Duffy Cup, because there was a lot of learnings from the semi-finals for both of them, certainly areas for improvement. But for each of you, what comes to mind? Maybe the managers are tuning in and they want to hear the experts' opinions of both of you, so no pressure.
You opened the dressing room wall Saturday night, probably. Far be it me now to be telling Brian Dowling and Cathal Murray what they need to be working on. They know better than us. From a Galway perspective, as I said, I actually think they just, don't think they've clicked yet, and I'm actually wondering if they've been holding something back. They've been workmanlike, and that's not, clearly Tipperary have made huge progress, and it was great to see that continuing from the league as well and from last year. But I just think that they will look to create a bit more space, deliver that ball in quickly, and Kilkenny will. Yeah, for me, Kilkenny cannot allow that space that they allowed Cork in the first 15 minutes the last day, if that's one thing. But that was their game plan, and it was a game plan that won out in the end, so who am I to say it was wrong?
For me, I suppose from a Kilkenny perspective, they would have been very disappointed with their slow start. And then, they didn't score until the 11th minute. And then in the second half, they didn't score for over 20 minutes. So for me, that's not going to be good enough against a team of Galway's calibre. So Brian Dowling is definitely going to be looking for a more consistent performance. There's going to be times where there's Galway are going to get on top, but Kilkenny can't afford to go 20 plus minutes without a score. So, and the other thing on top of that would be maybe they're being a little bit more clinical in front of the goal, especially in the first half. The last day, there was 3 or 4 chances that were, maybe they didn't take the correct decision. So I think they're the couple of things that Brian Dowling and Kilkenny will be hoping to fix ahead of Saturday.
Right, well, it's prediction time. You're in the hot seat. You're in the virtual hot seat. So, Ursula, who do you think is going to win 2020 Liberty Insurance All-Ireland Senior Championship Final? In 30 seconds or less.
Okay. Look, I think I'm going to stick with Galway. I've probably tipped them from the start this year. I was impressed with them last year, but I think their panel strength has improved this year. I think they're probably playing like champions. They're undefeated in the championship this year, and I think they've a greater scoring threat, the spread of scores, and I think a couple of subs could make a difference in this final. So I'm going to stick with Galway. But one thing I will say, I'll never underestimate a Kilkenny team once they reach a Croke Park, because anything can happen. But for me, it's Galway.
Daragh?
Yeah, unoriginal, I guess, maybe, but if it's good enough for Ursula, it's always good enough for me. I just think that, we were talking about maybe the difference in scoring, for argument's sake. I just think Galway's attack is superior. And, Kilkenny probably have a lot of new players coming into the attack and with a little less experience. And that will be crucial. I have huge respect, as I said, for Kilkenny, but I think Siobhan Gardner's had a big impact since coming in as well for Galway. And just overall, their strength and depth. I think they are a team on a mission, and I find it hard not to see Galway win this game.
So you've heard from the experts. My thanks to Ursula and Daragh for joining us today for previewing the All-Ireland final. Who's it going to be? We don't know. The preparation has been very different for both teams, but nonetheless, an All-Ireland title is at stake. You can catch coverage on RTE2. It starts from 6:10, and of course, you can also catch it on the RTE Player Worldwide. The very best of luck to both teams, and thanks so much for tuning in.